Welcome back. You're listening to the discussion of building a career in cybersecurity, sponsored by Raytheon on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. In this segment of the show, we continue our conversation with the University of Virginia's two-time National Collegiate Cyber Defense Champions. For this segment, my guests are Jack Verrier, Connor Steamrod, Jake Smith, Caroline Linkus, and Sam Spelsberg. First of all, congratulations to the second half of the team for winning the national championship for a second time in a row. Obviously, it's a big accomplishment. I want to start with, instead of going back through and talking about your experience at the cyber defense competition, because you won twice, you got a great experience in Washington, D.C. You got to meet a ton of really important people in the federal world. You got to go on a nice little tour of different places across the federal government. So Jack, start us off, talk about your week a little bit. You got to tour some of the secure facilities that most people don't get to see.
Sure, we got to visit the NSA, the CIA, got to visit the Secret Service training facility, visited the Pentagon, DARPA, DHS. It was a great week. I think many people, at least I, think of the government as this monolithic organization and think about it very abstractly. But getting to meet with the people that do the work on a daily basis and getting to see the kind of challenges they face in the places where they work and the things that really interest them was really grounding and pretty motivating, actually. I thought it was a really valuable experience, and it helped me personalize what the government does, and especially what opportunities are available.
What's interesting about that is people don't realize what the government is doing, but it's also a piece of that gets a bad rap. Oh, well, it's the government and they can't do something. And then you go see something like DARPA. I mean, give me a sense of how was it fun to be at DARPA?
Yeah, going to all these organizations was very interesting, and honestly, as you said, so much media, so much light goes to these governments as being slow and being inefficient. But when we were there, we saw things that I think all of us can say were rather uplifting and inspirational in a lot of ways. We're like, oh, they really are there. And DARPA was very cool, as well as FBI, CIA. Everyone had their own little network centers they were working on, and they were really looking at current issues and really preparing for things like the DHS. We talked about the election coming up. We talked about all these very important issues, and they are very much ready, much more now than they were years ago, for just about anything coming their way.
For me personally, coming into this week, I know that the way I was raised and my goals in life, I'm not motivated by money. And so the goal for a career is to do something that I think is important. And I don't know if there's been a time that I have toured facilities or organizations, businesses, where I've met collections of people that are so driven by a mission or a collective goal. And I think that was the biggest overall takeaway for me this week. Sure. Was that there are a lot of people, and there is bureaucracy, and there are slow aspects, but everyone is so driven by the mission and working so passionately towards these goals that are important, such as national security, election security, FBI apprehending criminals, things like that, that it was extremely compelling.
And I think that's a really fine point, because what the government struggles with generally is paying enough for cybersecurity talent, right? I mean, you talk about any of you guys that are seniors that are looking for a job or maybe just graduated and maybe haven't settled on a job yet, the money for someone with cyber skills is huge. But the mission that drives the government, I think, as Sam said, is really key, because that's what keeps people in to do the good thing. So maybe talk a little bit about, and I don't know if Caroline or Jake wants to jump in here a little bit. What was your impression as you talked to the government employees? You got to talk to Chris Krebs at DHS. You talked to Dana Deasy at the Defense Department CIO. You got to talk to the General Shanahan, who's head of the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center from DoD. A lot of cool people who I get to hang out with all the time. Jake or Caroline?
So for me, I thought it was really inspiring, because to be able to put a face to these names, like Jack said, and personalize the government was really important, because you could see that these people who are working on these specific projects are not just stagnant in what they're doing, maintaining the status quo. They're excited about innovation and kind of the next level of technology, whatever that may be in their specific fields, concerning their specific agency. So I thought that was really important.
And also, with cybersecurity is such a hard problem, but they're tackling it and they're moving fast, so they're not They're changing the way the government works in order to recruit people, in order to respond to these really hard cyber problems. So I think that was also just really neat to see how they're approaching the problem in a really new way, and focusing on recruiting young cyber talent.
And I think that's a great point, because the recruiting piece is so important. We, at the beginning of the conversation, we talked about the need for cyber workers is ever growing. So maybe Sam, jump in a little bit and talk about that. Did it open your eyes a little bit to saying, okay, maybe a career in cybersecurity, whether with the government, with the private sector, wherever, is not just possible but attractive?
Yes, absolutely. I think that previous to this trip and this week, I knew that cybersecurity in terms of national security or pursuing it within a government agency was possible, but I didn't know if it was something that was attractive to me. But I think Essie Miller, the Deputy Chief Information Officer, said it. She said it very plainly during our meeting with them. She said similar along the lines of what I said previously, that look, we can't pay as much as some of the private industry, but you come here and you're motivated by the mission, and you're surrounded by people who believe in what they're doing. And so after visiting some of these agencies, definitely thinking about and driven by wanting to enter into the intelligence community in the future.
When you win a competition, obviously it's a great motivator for anybody. I mean, not just your team, but anyone who's part of it. But it also, then when you add the top layer of that of, hey, I get to meet all these cool people and see that they're doing some really important work. And yes, I could go work at a company that deals with cyber for the commercial world, but I also have this opportunity potentially to work for the government. What does that mean for you guys, and also not just you, but the really next generation of really employees? Like, you guys are the next workforce.
Sure. I think for finalists and people that come from CCDC, I think it's an outstanding opportunity to kind of gain a balanced view of not only private opportunities, but government ones as well. It definitely makes me feel like that anybody that goes through this process definitely can make a more informed decision. I think a lot of the challenging part about navigating a career that you're just entering is knowing exactly where you go, where you want to go 5 or 10 years from now. And so getting this extra visibility into all these different jobs and roles and the things that you can do kind of helps paint that picture and kind of helps your planning a little bit.
And I think just to add on to that, with cyber, we're one team. The public, the private sector, you can span across both areas and be successful. But what's really clear this week is that you can spend time in the private sector and then hop back into the public sector, try out and experiment, and then go back. And they're creating these avenues that allow people to work in both the public and the private sector. So you don't really have to choose one or the other, and you can do cybersecurity in both. I think that's really important.
And one of the officials at the CIA that we spoke with, he said something that struck me and ties into what Jake was saying. He said it behooves you to at least participate in government service. And I think that I think he's right. And I think that cybersecurity especially is a issue that's pressing enough and ties in enough with our national security and ensuring the stability of our institutions that it is something that it has to be a collective group effort in terms of our nation, and people need to participate, and we need people to fill these roles, these important roles in the government.
It's funny you bring that, because one of the buzzwords we hear quite often is cyber is a team sport, and we've talked about honestly playing a game of like every time someone says it, but then when you get a chance to see, for instance, what DHS is doing, what the FBI is doing, and not just individually, but how they're working together, it really brings up some of those, you realize how tough this situation was. Did you guys have conversations about whether it's policy or workforce with the government officials? I mean, did they ask you what you care about? Maybe Connor, a little bit. Did you have those conversations?
Yeah, they definitely were there. They were very curious not only about what we did, but also, what's on your guys' minds versus, we're up here taking a much higher level view, but as a small, as a smaller fish in a much bigger pond, what do you pay attention to? And I think that we get access to a lot more of these smaller tools. We see a lot of smaller things that, sometimes get brushed over by these bigger governments. And we see things that can really bring ideas, bring new philosophies, and bring even new ways to work as a team together. Because we really, we're 8 people, and,
right.
11 of us when we alternate and we switch, because we mix and match to really build what's best. And that's something that government is doing, but government's also learning, not just from us, from people coming up, but a lot from the private sector.
And I think that's a great point that government has to continue to learn. And I think that's one of the reasons why these competitions, and then giving you guys the opportunity to go talk to the government employees, the officials, is so important. Caroline, maybe talk a little bit about your experience. What was your big takeaway from these meetings and the competition just generally?
Yeah, so there's this big emphasis put on the next generation of cyber professionals. And we as a team and as any team competing in this competition are put in a really unique position because we're in the future workforce and we're learning these concepts right now, but at the same time, we just got to go meet with all these government officials and people in the private sector who are working to, hire cyber professionals in the future. So I think us getting this opportunity is really important for us to go say, hey, there is this need, and communicate that even further, and bringing people even younger into this education process. So high school, middle school, whatever it takes. People are starting in college, and that's awesome, and that still is very early, but it could be started even sooner, I think.
Sam?
So something that I think highlights how pressing of an issue cyber is and how much collaboration is being emphasized is that, so this summer I'm working at a finance institution in New York City, and we've had these exercises where we have actually been on bridge calls with all the other finance shops, the major ones, and collaborating on doing cyber exercises to make sure that everyone's on the same page, to make sure that the institutions are secure together. And that level of collaboration between competing finance institutions is unprecedented because everyone is in the same space attempting to do the same things. And so it's become such a big issue that they've been willing to work together in that space.
The competition is kind of has put secondary to the need to work together because what are you seeing, what am I seeing, between us we're better. It's the old idea of crowdsourcing that kind of ran its course, but then you realize how important it is. We've just got about a minute and a half left for the end of this discussion, so let me just go down the line. Connor, start off. From your how does the competition, winning the competition, and then this experience in government, does it kind of open the door for you to say, what are my next career opportunities? What's in front of me?
Absolutely. If I'm going to be real, I'm actually a mechanical engineer. A lot of this computer science stuff is a hobby of mine, but I think that actually looking at it and even looking at the government as a mechanical engineering person, but looking through the computer science lens was something that is different for me and something I hadn't done before. But it opens a window for opportunities with CS and mechanical engineering working together and being able to use systems and really further a lot of the work we do.
Jack?
I think it was a great opportunity to get an idea of some of the real world issues that we're facing today, and it helps me think 5 or 10 or 15 years out about what I can be doing, and it helps give me ideas about my current graduate research at the University of Virginia.
Jake?
Yeah, I think for me, I think it's confirmed that I want to go into cybersecurity, and there's so many hard problems out there with security that I can go out there and solve and really make a difference in our world.
Caroline?
For me, I, in addition to computer science, have some other interests as far as like foreign affairs, languages, etc. But I think what this competition has really done for me is been able to combine kind of those communication skills and the technical skills and see them work in a space that's going to be very similar to a real world job environment. So I think that's been my biggest takeaway from it, is being able to kind of take a hybrid of your skills and interests and put that to use in the workforce.
All right, Sam, you get the last word.
This week, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not motivated by money, so I've been searching throughout college to find something that I found was worthy of pouring my effort into it. And this week definitely was one of the first times where I felt that I was surrounded by people that were doing things in a compelling manner in a way that I thought was attractive. And so I'm very glad that I had the opportunity to participate in this competition and go on this tour.
Excellent, very nice. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Let me thank my guests from the University of Virginia's 2-time National Collegiate Cyber Defense Champions. Thank you so much for your time. I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to Building a Career in Cybersecurity, sponsored by Raytheon on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. To learn more, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Raytheon.